Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor. This video is very overdue and it's going to be my quarterly wrap up for the months of July, August and September. I would need to have done this anyway just because I caught COVID at the start of July and I'm still dealing with long COVID, which sucks. So I've not been on my game with making videos and keeping on top of things, and I've certainly not been on my game reading wise. But having to wait this long, or ended up waiting this long before doing this video, has made me reevaluate how I do wrap-ups on this channel. And I don't think monthly wrap-ups work for the way I do videos and for how much I read. Where it's appropriate, I like to do individual book reviews, and it makes no sense to do 4, maybe 5 individual book reviews in 1 month and then do a wrap-up, because it's just a lot of repetition, and I'm sure there's not a lot of crossover of people who watch both. It just seems a bit of a waste of time. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to transition into doing quarterly wrap-ups, so every 3 months, and that works out quite nicely. I'll still be doing all my individual book reviews, but I'll then have one video summarising all the books I read in the last 3 months, and I'll have lots of links to all of the individual reviews, and that should hopefully stave off some repetition and be a bit more clear with what's going on. And because they'll be every 3 months, I'll maybe have a little bit of an update about what's going on in them as well. It'll just be a bit more of a generalised video. So as I said, I've been quite unwell, so I've not read an awful lot, so this isn't going to be a terribly long-winded video. And also a departure from my norm is I normally really love to get out the individual book reviews before I do my wrap-up, because then I can link back to the individual review, and it just makes more sense that it's all the videos from July and then the video for July wrap-up. Makes sense. That's not been able to happen. I'm still struggling with my health and my energy wise, and I've just not been able to make that happen. So I'm doing my wrap up just because it's the 20th of October when I'm filming this. I'm hoping to get this out today, but we'll see how that goes. And I don't want to wait to do the 4 or 5 individual book reviews before filming this, because who knows when that'll happen. This will be out of order, but I will be sure to come back to this video and link all the individual reviews in the description as I make them. So let's just dive straight into the books I read. The first book was The Singing by Alison Grogan, which is the 4th book in the Pelennor series. I will leave linked in the description my series wrap-up of that book, because I did manage to get that filmed and out before I became unwell. So I can't say too much about this book because it is the 4th book in a series, and there's also a prequel book that's a prequel in my mind, but a lot of people mark it as the 5th book. I can't really explain too much about what's going on because major spoilers. But in the first book, The Gift, you start off following Merad, who is a slave in this place called Gilman's Cot, and she is rescued by a magic user called Cadvan, and magic users are called bards in this world. And it starts her off on an adventure of discovering who she really is and where she was stolen from, and it is a chosen one trope, and she goes off on an adventure to save the world from evil, basically. There's so many amazing characters in this series. Merad goes on such a discovery of herself. I think she's like 16 at the start of this series, and she grows and develops and changes as such a rich character. And all the side characters are so well developed as well. There's amazing friendships in this series, and the landscape is so rich and diverse, and I love learning about all the different cultures in this world, and just the lore behind it is so interesting. It's also got a fantastic map, and I love a good map. So in particular, this 4th book is more so rounding out an overarching plot through all the series, through all the books, and it's just great fun, and it is high fantasy written for young adults in such a beautiful way, and it is very much a classic story. I think it's very timeless, and I wish more people read it. And I will stop talking about it too much because I have a whole video about that. I'll leave linked below if you're interested. The next book I read in July was The Friendship by Alison Grogan, and this is like a 19-page short story that you could find on her website, and it features 2 or 3 characters from the Pelennor series, and it's them as young men, and when they're first introduced to each other they don't get on, and the story's called The Friendship. It's 19 pages long, and it's just them going through something together and developing a friendship that lasts a very long time. The only downside to this book, not even book, short story, was that it was too short. It would have been nice to get more information and learn more about these characters from that time where they're so much younger than you see them in the main series. But I rather suppose that's the point. It's just an added extra for the more ambitious reader of the series, and it was good taste into the world and a bit more information about these characters. And the last book I read in July was The Lonelita, Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was a couple of weeks or a week or so into me being unwell. I was just desperate for a comfort read, and in 2 days I read this. And I've read this a couple of times now, and it's just such a comfort series for me. It's very soft sci-fi. It's all about the characters and the environment, and it's just so slow paced, and the plot is lovely, and it's just a very meandering story, and I really enjoy this series so much. And I'm so gutted that Becky Chambers has said that this is the end of the series. There's only 4 books in it, and a bit sad that she's not going to write any more books in that series. You're following a character, Rosemary Harper, who joins this ship in space called the Wayfarer, and she meets their eclectic crew, and they are like a wormhole burring ship, if that makes sense. And that's what they do. They get contracts and they drill wormholes into space, and that allows people to travel places faster. So it's quite a laborious job, and it takes a lot of time to travel to these places to then drill back through. And yeah, it's more just a character study about these characters. What I love most about Becky Chambers' writing, especially in this sci-fi series, is her ability to create so many different fantastical alien species. They're all so nuanced and unique. Every species has a different culture and a different biology and so much more. I can't even begin to describe how detailed and how nuanced all these different species are, and in every book you meet a few more, and it just fleshes out this universe even more, and it's fantastic. It's also not too bogged down with lots of technical things. You just very much learn in a very easygoing way all these different things, and I think it's done excellently. She really pulls off the very slow, soft sci-fi, and it's lovely. I really do love my hard sci-fi, but this was just a breath of fresh air, and I really enjoyed rereading it again. And then this will really show you how my July reading went in my bullet journal. Yeah, so let's not focus on that because it's a little bit sad. Then we head into August. The first week in August I was still really unwell, but thereafter I started to feel a bit better, but I still wasn't in the physical reading mood. I've just been having really bad headaches every single day, and I still have them, and I've just not been able to concentrate on reading as much as I used to be able to. So August is my month for audiobooks. I went ham on a few audiobooks and was desperate to get back into reading so I could film videos and just kind of get back into the groove of things. So the first audiobook I listened to was Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells, which is the 6th book in the Murderbot Diaries series. I recently signed up for Scribd, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it as an alternative to Audible. I'll leave my link in the description if you're interested in signing up. You get 2 free months to try out Scribd, and I get a free month as well. This is just something anyone who's got a Scribd account can share with their friends and things like that. This was my first Murderbot book I've listened to on audiobook because they're novellas. They're a series I've actually really enjoyed reading physically because they're so quick. But I will say I really thoroughly enjoyed the narrator of this book. It made the character of Murderbot come to life, and they just executed the audiobook very well. I'm just very picky about the narrator and the voice because otherwise they're just really irritating and it pulls me out of the book, and it just annoys me. Again, this is the 6th book in a series, so I don't really want to spoil anything, but the Murderbot books are novellas, and they follow the character of Murderbot. Murderbot is very sarcastic and it's very quippy in their head about what they think of the humans around them and their interactions and their stupid decision making, and it's just good fun. So I would highly recommend anyone to pick up the first Murderbot book, which is All System Red, and yeah, give it a go. It's Just great. The next book I read in August was Across the Green Grass Fields by Shauna Maguire, and this is the 6th book in the Wayward Children series. This is also a series of novellas, and I just now realised that they're both the 6th books, and that's quite funny. I really enjoyed this world. Again, I enjoyed the narrator and enjoyed the story, but there was no real plot and no real point, which I just felt was quite strange. In all the other Wayward Children series books, there's an adventure to be had, there's a puzzle to be solved, there's a place to go, there's something driving the story. But in this one, there really wasn't, in my opinion. You're following Regan, who is a young girl who falls through a portal into a land where there's unicorns and centaurs. And in the human world, there's nothing she loves more than riding and taking care of horses. So this world fit her to a T. But the rules in this world are very different from our own. I thought the characters of the centaurs were very interesting, and I thought their herd dynamics were also very clever and very much feeds into the idea that they're centaurs. They live very differently to humans. I just thought the whole dynamic of the world was very interesting. I would have liked to have learned more. But although I really love Regan's character and the people that she meets and interacts with, and Regan's own personal situation, and try not to spoil it, and with what's going on with her that you learn later on, I feel like that was done very well. It just lacked plot and substance, in my opinion, although I still greatly enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to continuing on with the Wayward Children series because they're novellas. I just find them really light and fun, and I'm really enjoying being transported to a very different kind of world every book. Yeah, you don't really know what's waiting next through another door. I then read Rolling in the Deep by Myra Grant, which is book 0.5 in the Rolling in the Deep series. A few months ago, or not even that long ago, I read Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant, which I absolutely loved. This is about killer mermaids in the Mariana Trench in the middle of the ocean, and about film crews going out to document it, and scientists trying to work out the mermaids and things like that. And in this book, the main character is propelled to go on this expedition because her sister went before her as part of a television crew and died. That's not really a spoiler. And something tragic happened to all the people on that boat. And this is the book you read first, and I would always recommend you read this first. There's so many spoilers in this prequel because you're seeing it through someone else's lens. The reason why I thoroughly enjoyed this was because I had the background information of Into the Drowning Deep. The television network Imagined are setting out to explore the possibility of mermaids in the Mariana Trench. So they go out with their film crew and they're trying to explore what's going on. And you know in the Into the Drowning Deep something bad happens. It was fun to see these characters interact with the mermaids first and to see what the first contact looked like. I just enjoyed how much more information this gave you. It wouldn't make much sense and probably wouldn't be as enjoyed if you read this first or just happened to randomly read this and think it was a one-off novella. It kind of puts the story a bit out of order and it spoils the main climax of the main book. The characters are all really interesting. They're all there for different reasons, and yeah, it was just a really fun novella, and I loved getting more information about this book and series, and I just really love Myra Grant's writing. And the last book I read in August was Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. This book seems like a very odd choice for me because it is a children's story, and it's the first in a series called The Up and Under. However, what you may not know is that it's actually a book that's been written from within a book called Middle Game by Shauna Maguire. In the story Middle Game by Shauna Maguire, which was a standalone, and now I believe there is a sequel coming out next year, I believe. You're following twins, and they are separated at birth, and they've been experimented on, and they have powers. And interspersed through that book, before certain chapters, there's excerpts from this book called Over the Woodward Wall. And this book is put in this. And Over the Woodward Wall is written as like an explanation to events happening within Middle Game. And I think lots of people called, once Middle Game was out, to have Over the Woodward Wall be its own book. So Shauna Maguire provided, and she made another pen name, because if you didn't know, Myra Grant Shauna Maguire and a Deborah Baker are the same person. So over the Woodward Wall, you're following two children who never interact and never bump into each other, even though they live right next to each other. And they are diverted on their way to school, and they end up climbing over a wall, thinking that'll be a shortcut for them to get to school on time. However, they end up in the Up and Under. They're very different children. Avery is very prim and proper and takes care of himself and is always well presented and has his shoes shined and his tie straight. And Zib is the very definition of a small, excitable child who loves scrambling over trees and rocks and is always covered in scrapes and bruises and loves getting her hands dirty and is just very busy and all over the place. They couldn't be more different children. And this is a story of them being in the Up and Under and interacting with all manner of creatures and just going on an adventure. This can very much be read without any context to the Middle Game series, and I'm sure children will just love it in general. And if you like reading children's books, you'll love this as well. It's a very strange and quirky story, and to be honest, I'm not sure how it explains what's going on in Middle Game. It didn't really help me. I still enjoyed it, and I'm glad I listened to an audiobook, just because that suits me more, because this isn't really a book I would normally have picked up on my own. I only read it because of the connection with the Middle Game series. So I'm not really sure. If anyone knows how it actually links in and the explanation behind it, please leave a comment below. I would love to know. And here's my bullet journal for August, a little bit more spread out, and that's just because I was listening to audiobooks and I still hadn't physically read anything by this point. But I was getting there. You guys say hi? You guys say hi? I think he's quite sleepy. What are you doing? What are you doing? Moving on to September, I read The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. LeGuin. I struggled a wee bit with this book. Struggled a big bit. This was the first book club pick for SFF Sake book club that I'm running with some pals. We've taken a short hiatus just because we've all had a lot going on. I know we've just started it, but bear with us if you're wanting to join in the Discord, and everyone's links are in the description. This was our first read, and because I hadn't been reading because of COVID, I struggled to read this because it's classic sci-fi, and yeah, just a very strange story. You're following George Orr, who, while he's dreaming, can alter reality. So if he dreams that one day all elephants are actually bright purple, he'll wake up the next day and it's like they've always been purple, only he remembers that it was changed. He goes to a psychiatrist and they're exploring how to do hypnosis to see if they can fix him and stop him from dreaming and changing reality. However, the psychiatrist takes things into his own hands and decides to manipulate George into doing what he wants. And thus ensues lots of changing worlds and changing landscapes in terms of what's going on. And George isn't particularly happy about that. The characters kind of annoyed me a wee bit. I just found them, they just never did anything that would make sense to me. That's a whole other side. I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is a book that definitely needs to be discussed with a group of people, and I'd still like to do that with our book club. But let me know if you've read this book and if you found it confusing or if you enjoyed it. I just thought it was an interesting concept and it raised a lot of really interesting questions, but overall the execution, it just wasn't a really fun and engaging read, and I struggled to read it. So I don't know if that was just my frame of mind at the time or if I would struggle to read it even prior to being unwell. The next book I read was another novella, and I only heard about this book because, as I said, I have a subscription to Scribd, and this book came in my recommended after reading Fugitive Telemetry, and I didn't have many reviews, and even looking online, it doesn't look like it's been widely read, so I definitely want to mention it so that it gets out there more. And I will be sure to do an individual book review for this book as well, because I think it was really good fun. It's called The Network by Cindy Zhang. I feel like I'd be better served just reading the synopsis. Sabine is working on a mixed species spaceship when it abruptly comes under attack by a strange monster. When she encounters airless, a set, they manage to hide together and survive the assault. They are soon rescued by Naomi, captain of a mercenary ship, which has hired to kidnap the two survivors, but at the last minute chooses to rescue them instead, putting them, Naomi, and her crew in peril from the government who hired them. As if being wanted wasn't enough, the monster is still out there. It's only 106 pages long, but there's a lot packed into this book. It only covers a very small few amount of characters and in a very small enclosed space. But there's a lot going on and I really enjoyed it. There was some really great world building and very interesting characters, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The character of Airless, who is a set, was really fascinating because what they are is kind of, I'm not really going to explain this well, kind of like technology given consciousness, and they're linked into the network and they're all interconnected, so they kind of interact with people differently, and it's kind of like an alien species but not, because it's technology made, and it's really confusing when I'm trying to explain it. But it was such an interesting concept and I really enjoyed it, and I would very much have liked a longer book with more going on, or for Cindy to perhaps write a sequel to see what happens with these characters next. I just found Airless and Sabine's interactions really lovely, and I liked the kind of relationship they developed together. Yeah, I would definitely love to see more from this author, and I'm hoping that I can read more of their books because this was a really lovely sci-fi. And the last book, I bet you're wanting me to shut up, this has been quite a long video, is The Marionettes by Katie Wismer. I read this and loved it. This is the first book in the Marionettes series, and Katie Wismer is a self-published author and she has her own YouTube channel here that I'll leave linked below, where she does author tube content and booktube content as well, and she has done for years, and I've watched her videos for a very long time. This is my first book of hers I've ever bought though, because she has previously written contemporary romance and poetry books, and if you take a look at my channel, that's not what I read at all. So I was so excited when she brought out this series, which is the start of perhaps a 5-book series or more, hopefully more, which is a supernatural vampire witch romance series, and in the new adult category. I think this is the first book I read in new adult. I won't go into too much detail because I am going to do an individual review for this book. You're following the character of Valerie Darkmoor, who is a blood witch, which in itself is a really interesting concept, and I love the magic in this world, and I'm so excited to see how all the other witches use their powers and what their abilities are. I really enjoy the way Katie has written the vampires as well, and the hierarchy and all of that. It's really interesting, it's fascinating. Valerie is in the final stages of being at the academy, where she has to pass a series of tests to be able to graduate and be able to serve the Queen. And it's just a very bloody violent book, and I love it, very much up my street. I really enjoyed Katie's writing style, and I'm just always so thoroughly impressed by people who can self-publish books, just all under their own power. It's just such an amazing thing, and I'm so excited by the fact that book 2 is coming out on the 7th of December, I believe, so not long to wait for book 2, which is exciting because this book has quite the cliffhanger. However, it'll probably be a year or more before we get book 3 and the rest, but I will learn to be patient. So I would encourage you to pick this up if any of that sounds interesting. And I'll lastly just show you my reading journal for September. Not great. I'm hoping to kind of pick up more of my reading now for this end of the year. So that's it, a bit of a whirlwind. I'm hoping to have out in the next week or two all the individual book reviews, where you'll have more information and more in-depth thoughts from me about how I actually thought about all these books. Please leave a comment down below if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. If you're not interested in picking up any of these books, I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.